you always get to that point of your own greatness where you then need somebody to kind of take you to the next level. And how I look at things, I always look at things from a holistic perspective.
Yeah.
And me, I'm very mild, chill, laid back. And as you have told me on like many occasions, like I really don't care about money like that.
Yeah.
The big thing for me is always impact.
100%.
And so for me, I needed to find balance in that because there's also things that I want to achieve.
100%.
And we'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of like the healing center and things of that nature. But I realized that as I'm at the conference, in my mind, I'm understanding that you're a good balance for me.
Yeah.
In terms of like raising my enthusiasm about what I do.
Yeah.
Going a little bit more digital.
Yeah.
And getting systems in place.
Yeah.
And so because you kind of had those things in play already, I said, all right, let's see how it goes. And, you know.
Safe to say it went good.
We're pretty damn good.
And I'm happy. I always talk about one play, and I'm sure you took a bunch, but one of them was just more visibility for you.
Yeah.
You went on like a crazy podcast run. And a lot of them, like I just heard Donnie say, it was my most viewed episodes.
Yep.
It was like, and to be honest, I thought you would think health is boring, and that's the stigma they put around as not exciting, but like really understanding this thing is game changer for you, but it's really helping a lot of people, man.
Yeah, but because health is boring.
Yeah.
I mean, diabetes ain't sexy.
Right, facts.
You know, so having those conversations is never sexy, and especially in our community because, you know, the first thing we do in our community when we get sick is we say we're not sick. Like if you hear somebody cough or, you know, something like that, they're like, nah, you sick? Nah, I'm not sick.
Yeah.
Or like we've all had a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt who was literally, you know, approaching their deathbed and said nothing and then just all of a sudden pass away. So especially in our community, it's not a sexy conversation. Yeah. But what I try to help people understand is that the healthiest version of you is the highest version of you.
Yeah.
And it's probably your dis-ease is probably why you're not getting the things that you want in life. It's probably why you're not experiencing yourself in the divine nature that you're supposed to be in. It's probably why you're not feeling elevated. And so what I try to do is help people understand that when you get to your healthiest form of you, then you're going to be able to experience all that abundance that has been promised to you through God. And so I think that's what causes people to shift a little bit. And I just simply explain through my own personal journey how it shifted my life, and then it inspires others.
How long have you been vegan now?
Almost 13 years.
13 years. Were you a doctor when you were vegan?
I was in the hospital.
How long you been a doctor?
Since 2014.
Okay. What made you say, I'm going to be a doctor? Like, what was the thing were you always on this health journey? What made you say, I'm going to be a doctor?
Man, so growing up, I grew up in the hood. Like there was not a lot of examples.
What hood? Like what? Georgia?
Georgia,
okay,
yeah. So like Georgia. Primarily Georgia.
Okay.
But I have family other places, and we've lived other places as well too, but primarily in Georgia. And growing up, there wasn't a lot of examples. And the only example I did have was my uncle, who was a congressman. And so in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to be a congressman. So I was left to whatever examples I had in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
But the person that I loved the most was my grandmother. Like she was just like a God on earth to me. And the way she demonstrated life and poured into other people, it made me want to be more like her. And so she got colorectal cancer, and on her deathbed, I mean, I didn't even know she was sick.
Wow.
And then I get a call from my cousin that's, you need to come home. I was at a basketball camp, and she's saying that she's real sick. And I'm like, okay, so how sick? And
what age were you then?
I was like maybe 14 or 15.
Got it, okay.
And so she was like really sick, and she asked you to come. So I'm like, drop everything, leave the camp, run on. And I get there, and when I get there, I'm realizing that it looks like it's it. Like people are surrounding the bed.
Yeah.
And then as I walk in, they make a space out for me. And my grandmother can't talk. She's just staring up into the ceiling. And so now I'm realizing I'm about to lose my grandmother. And I remember when I was 8, I said a prayer. I said, God, please do not let my grandmother die before I do. You know, and now I'm facing this. And as I'm there, I'm like, pleading with her, do not die. Like, I promise you all these things I'm going to do for you, etc. And then I realized there was just a moment of clarity where it was like, you being selfish, because she's literally gasping for air, trying to hold on.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I just said, you know, I love you, grandmother. You don't have, you can go. And 2 minutes later, she passed away.
Wow.
And in that moment, I said to myself, like, I mean, it was agony at first. But then, you know, when you go through anything in life, there's going to be moments where there's a very brief moment of clarity. And that very brief moment for me was, I wish I could have done something about this. And, you know, I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. But when I was in school, I was the kid that never bought books home, but I was always smart in science. And I always had this affinity for both chemistry and biology. And that affinity for it just led me into health. And I was like, that's how I could have helped my grandmother. And so that's what inspired me to do what I do.
Wow. You gave me another story. Was it an uncle that also inspired you? I feel like we were on a show. Did you mention your uncle? Was
Yeah.
your uncle?
Yeah, so like
Was
I
that
said,
the second person that inspired you?
Yeah, my uncle, who was a congressman and also huge in the civil rights. I would see him come home for like family reunions. And because he was so well known, like when you would see him, it would be like, it's like almost an aura around him, because it's like, damn, this guy walked with Dr. Martin Luther King, like, and how people respond to him. And so as I would see him, I would always say to myself, like, I'm cut from that. Like, the same blood that's in him is like coursing through me. Yeah. But I don't want to be that, but I want to do something that impacts like him.
What age was you thinking this at?
I was thinking this around 10.
Wow.
Yeah, around
I wasn't
10.
thinking nothing like that at 10.
Well,
Dude, I was gonna be in the NBA or something, like most probably young kids dream.
Well, I think what happened with me is I went through so much trauma between 10 and 12. Between those ages, I lost 3 of my friends. I watched another friend kill a friend with a bat. I lost my best.
Watched it?
Yeah.
Wow.
I watched, you know, my cousin get killed being chased by the police. I had another friend commit a double homicide and go to prison he's still in prison today. Yeah. And you know, growing up,
You did that at 10 or 12?
no, I always hung out with older
people,
Yeah, always older.
He got life.
He got life.
So he ain't
Life,
coming home.
triple life.
Damn.
And so you know, experiencing that's a lot of loss and a lot of fear too.
Yeah.
That turns into aggression. And because of that, I just was trying to figure out, like, how do I not end up like this?
Yeah.
And so, like, my thought pattern was different because of the experiences. And so as I'm there with watching my uncle and thinking to myself, like, I want to be his impact on the world. And then later on in life, I'm here in Atlanta at Georgia State, and I'm going to the bookstore to like do some studying. And I open the door, and it's an elderly man coming out, and it's my uncle. And at first, he didn't even recognize me. And I was like, how you doing? And he was like, how you doing, young man? He was like, and I was like, good to see you again. He was like, again? I was like, I'm Bobby. I'm Bobby Price's son. And he was like, you're my nephew. And I was like, yeah. And so in that moment, he kind of tucked me under his wing. Whenever he would go places, he would take me with him, and I would get to meet people and just see how he responds to people. And from there, it just said that I wanted to be able to impact people like this where it changes their lives. And so he was the second source of inspiration for me.
I be telling people, bro, it's like, all you got to do is see it one time. I be trying to get people to get to the spot quicker. Like, put your kid on the air, buy them a passport, let them see another country. Yeah. There's more than West Philly. There's more than whatever part of Georgia you were at. Like, you got to, the quicker you could see it, the quicker you could believe it. Yeah. Like, my mom sent me that school, it's all Caucasian people, it's only 50 black people. Yep. I'm like, wait, they driving to school? They had mansions? I didn't know what no mansion was. Right. Pool houses. I used to leave out my man crib, John, and go through the woods. We at Beth House, she got a theater? Yeah. A theater in the house? I'm like, what's this? Yeah. But that never left my brain.
Yeah,
I knew it was going to be me someday. I didn't know when, but I just knew it was. So,
Yeah.
So you were telling me the story about you were in this hospital. You were reversing diabetes. What else were you doing? Like you was doing all these heroic things, but I don't think you were getting any credit for it. What are some of the things you were doing in that hospital? Like you talked about.
The first heroic thing was I reversed my hypertension. I got diagnosed with hypertension at age 16.
What's hypertension?
High blood pressure.
Okay.
And it was really high.
Okay.
Sometimes it was stroke level, like 200 over 190.
Wow.
And so I had lived with that since 16. So here I am in the hospital.
How did you get it? How do people get it?
Man, to be honest with you, like looking back retrospectively, it was a combination of a lot of things. But the biggest thing was diet. Okay. You know how we eat.
Yeah.
And then the secondary thing was trauma. And most people don't understand how emotional trauma plays a role on our physical health.
Mm.
And so again, I lost all of my grandparents by the time I'm like 15 years old.
Yeah.
I lost all of those friends. I had a crew of like 8. It dwindled down to like 1 or 2.
Wow.
And
All the murder or homicide.
or going to jail.
Yeah.
And so that's trauma. And it didn't make me a tough person.
Mm-hmm.
It made me initially an aggressive person.
Mm-hmm.
So that aggression was spilling out and it was about to ruin my life. And so that's what created that type of tension. That's why they call it hypertension, because it's increased tension in the body.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I got mine. And so as I'm here in the hospital and I'm like, again, like my whole premise was my grandmother. I got to heal people. And what I'm noticing, and I work for the FDA too. And so what I noticed was it wasn't healing people. It was just putting a Band-Aid on it. It was just addressing the symptoms.
What FDA stand for?
Food and Drug Administration. So they're responsible for approving all the lab-grown meat, the genetically modified, the GMO salmon.
Yeah.
Like they're responsible for that, but they're also responsible for drugs as well too.
Mm.
And so while I'm working there, and I'm able to see, because I'm working at Grady, which is an indigent hospital, underserved hospital, and I'm working at other hospitals, and what I'm noticing is that we're the sickest, and we ain't getting any better. And most of the people who are having a heart attack, who are having a stroke, they're on medications when they have these heart attacks and strokes. Mm. And so I'm taking that in consideration because I got hypertension, I got high blood pressure. So even though like I'm taking this diuretic, I could still have a heart attack or stroke. So that was the realization that said, I probably need to do something about me before I can help anybody else. Wow. And I'm realizing that even though the medications are lowering the blood pressure, it's not necessarily helping with the eventual outcome.
It's just a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid.
All medicine is a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid because it's addressing the symptoms and not the cause. Mm. So if you're not addressing why you have hypertension, all you're doing is manipulating the biochemistry to make the blood pressure to appear low.